If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description. Additionally, if you would like to request novels and access my Google Drive where I have 200 plus audiobooks, then you can join my Patreon. Link is also provided in the description.
Chapter 21. They have dared for 4 short years. Only 4 years have passed. In that time, all doubts had vanished. I've truly been waiting for this for a long time, the so-called blood ceremony. June wanted to go out and end all this that had haunted his mind for all these years, even though he knew it probably hadn't been the best idea. The June of today was focused, precise, and incredibly lethal in all the small elimination missions that the twins had invited him to. What is it that you desire? Fortune? Glory? Power? Revenge? Or information, or perhaps simply respect? If it's the latter, then everything you desire is here. Everything could be obtained in this place, anything one wanted could be had, as long as they were determined men. June had renounced any feelings or doubts over these 4 years and learned the most perverse ways to kill a man in combat. He now had his own arsenal of weapons, no one could stop him from investigating further. Now he had many more things at his disposal that could help him on a battlefield, even when at a disadvantage. June spent a lot of time training, his body grew, and every muscle that formed him had a layer of power that overflowed from him. Jun's robe was now long, with eye marks at the bottom of his waist, hiding his entire body. He carried a small sword, a regular sword, and numerous small knives. On his back, he carried a small pouch with sound, smoke, and air bombs. These were the weapons of the Azura village, which could be used in combat, but June was given an order to use them only if he was attacked by all the members of the blood ceremony. In a one-on-one battle, June would never lose, even in a 2-on-2 battle, but the audacity of joining forces to kill him was reason enough to use this secret arsenal. June hadn't cut his hair in the last 4 years, he now had it tied in a ponytail, though he didn't bother to tie it completely, so the rest of his hair hung loose. He stood at 1.70 meters, quite tall for being only 14 years old. For 4 years, June had perfected his swordsmanship, he didn't bother naming them and simply called them the Dance of the Black Moon. He trained his body and achieved an indescribable visible growth, but his inner growth remained slow. The only realization June had acquired in these last 4 years was that he was an arrogant, ignorant, strong being, still without intense desires. Time had been ruthless and did not wait for Jun's calm steps to discover what he wanted. Kid. Yes. Early in the morning, at the top of a mountain. As had happened over the last 4 years, June, who had gone out to spend more time with Vargo, opened his eyes from meditation when called. At the end of his gaze was Vargo, an absurd man best described as a monster. He looked more frail than in their first encounter. One day, his figure, which June could barely make eye contact with by looking up, no longer seemed so large. This happened because, just as Vargo's waist bent more and more, June grew. Now they were at eye level and stared at each other, but June couldn't look directly at him because, for some reason, it didn't feel right to do so. That's why, every time he responded to Vargo's call, he always lowered his head. So, while June waited for Vargo's response with his head bowed, Vargo continued speaking, "Today is the day you leave, I hope never to see you again, though I know the heavens are not so merciful to my words. I will miss you too. I doubt it very much, but you understand the situation you're in far better than your companion, whom I suggest you kill first." June smiled slightly and asked, "Did you also suggest that to the other candidate?" "That's correct, he must kill you first. I don't know why I cling so much to life, maybe it's because ever since I woke up, they've tried to take it from me. That has made me arrogant, but I know I'll enjoy myself at some point on my path," June said, becoming a bit more analytical. Vargo wanted to mock him, but those words made much more sense than they initially appeared to. "Then I'll go. I hope the place is at least pleasant. You'll love it, especially when it's all drenched in blood." June didn't know what to say to this, it should have been traumatic, but for some reason, it didn't seem as violent as it sounded. Chapter 22, The Blood Ceremony 1. June took a horse along with the others who escorted him, and only then did he realize that the other selected participant was Cheng, the boy he had met during the trial who had come in second place. "I wish you the best of luck." "Same to you." June felt a bit uncomfortable with this boy, he couldn't imagine killing someone who was just trying to get through a trial dreamed of by many. The journey was long, it took 5 days to arrive. But when they reached the site where the blood ceremony would be held, they found numerous men accompanied by their representatives. That is the tree's village, they all specialize in the sword just like us, with the only difference being that their style is even more meticulous in its movements. Trevor accompanied June at all times. Astaroth went to meet with the village leaders to discuss the smartest approach for this new ceremony. What June noticed upon arrival was that no one spoke, no one was interested in learning anything more about anyone else. But from an objective point of view, this was fine. After all, they would soon try to kill each other in the ceremony. This place had special cabins for the selected ones, where there was a hot water tub so they could bathe and rest sufficiently. But June did none of this, he simply sat and meditated in silence. He had been advised not to eat or drink anything given to him at this place, much less take a shower. Only the heavens knew what they had done to the water or food, no one trusted anyone right before the ceremony. Any news? June asked as he sensed a presence in front of his door. The ceremony has been moved up, it will be in a few hours. I think many have pressured our village because we have been winners for 40 years. That was feasible, villages needed strong representatives to avoid feeling inferior. It was normal for them to insist on accelerating the ceremony a few hours after the representatives of the Azura village arrived. June estimated that many had been here for days already, rested, and eager to win. They would all be tough opponents. Cheng would have many problems if he decided to go against him. The smartest thing they could do was join forces to kill the other participants and then kill each other in the final round. Still, Cheng's pride would be his downfall, and Jun's arrogance would end any possible negotiation. The mere fact that they think we're exhausted from the journey makes them weaker against us, June murmured as he took his sword, ready to leave. The warlocks use longer swords, be careful of the hounds too, as they often attack unexpectedly. We have information that there is someone strong in the Storm Village, he's called Albion, a 20-year-old boy who is favored to be the winner this year. June stood up and said, don't mention the participants to me anymore, many things are unnecessary to learn. You are right, as always. Don't agree with everything I say either. If I die here, I wasn't good enough to deserve getting out of here. June took his sword and took a deep breath. We will leave you at midnight and return tomorrow morning, there must be only one survivor, so don't try to escape. There is a perimeter of 15 kilometers that is the ceremony area, although I recommend trying to end it in the center. June and Cheng nodded at Astaroth's words, who always acted calmly. This was, after all, for the benefit of the clan. Whoever wins deserves it. As they approached their position, Cheng averted his gaze and said, don't expect any help from me. They'll crush us together, things will get very ugly if we don't unite at the beginning. June wasn't making an effort to ally with Cheng, he was simply saying what came to mind. I'd rather die than team up with you. Cheng hated June because of his attitude. June hadn't known Cheng was so resentful just because he boasted about being better in the trial. He thought Cheng would have forgotten it over these 4 years, but it seemed not. They're going to kick our asses, at least I'll use you as a shield, June said with a slight smile, but since the scarf around his neck covered half his face, Cheng didn't know he was smiling. Why do you speak so strangely? It's not strange to me, it makes perfect sense. Better keep quiet. June sighed, he hadn't expected to have such an idiot as a clan mate. He thought about Vargo's suggestion and seriously considered killing Cheng first. When they reached their position, there were many more participants, some of average height for their age and others quite large. Aren't they ashamed to come here at 20 years old to compete? If I were them, I would have slit my throat at the thought of fighting a 15-year-old kid. As always, June started speaking without anyone asking him to. Suddenly, an old man walked towards the center of the circle and said, the blood ceremony will begin with the sound of thunder coming from the mountains, no one should move before that. June circulated his energy and began to stabilize his breathing to take the first move. The biggest one will be the first to die, after killing him, I'll see how the competition unfolds, June thought, and at that moment, a loud sound came from afar. There was no one else around, only the competitors. That's why there were no rules, everything was allowed, and June was prepared for all of it. Boom! But just as he thought everything would be fine, Cheng stepped back, and everyone stared at him intently without moving. Chapter 23, The Blood Ceremony 2. June had thought this would be a general bloodbath, but it seemed everyone had a plan he wasn't aware of. Even the idiot Cheng had joined the party. In this situation, June felt like the kid who wasn't invited to the study groups. How disappointing! I thought you were all great warriors, but it turns out you're just a bunch of cowards. You must be June. Your friend told us that you have been favored by the Haiyue Clan because of your talent. He mentioned that you passed a test no man has passed in over 1,000 years, so we'll kill you first, just to be safe. At this moment, June needed to do only one thing, analyze his opponents and decide who to kill first. It was an emotion closely related to fear. No matter if there were hundreds or thousands, he was enough to stop them all. He wasn't so weak as to be unable to do it. He still wielded the sword given to him for being one of the two selected from the Azura village. It was a sword more suited for taking life than for protecting it. However, even such a sword was enough to win any kind of battle. In the midst of his contemplation, all the killers in the ceremony looked at June, waiting for his move. Everyone tensed up further. June hadn't moved, even after they surrounded him. June looked at the 5 figures showing signs of caution towards him and unleashed his inner energy, which had been heavily suppressed within him. It was the manifestation of the idea that they did not deserve a moment of rest. A brief standoff. A subsequent silence. Soon, a solemn voice echoed, and June, who had closed his eyes, let out a long sigh, "Then everyone here will die by my sword." Boom! The internal energy burst from Jun's body. It was a demonstration of power, and although it was not visible, all those who wielded internal energy saw June surrounded by a sinister darkness. The weakest were paralyzed, those who could still draw their swords couldn't breathe, and the strongest were terrified. Jun's inner energy was like a violent sea of darkness, something achievable only with an insatiable thirst for blood. June, feeling the energy gathering in his body according to the laws, raised his sword and leaned forward. It was not a very favorable situation for June. In total, there were 17 assassins who would try to kill him, acclaimed for their different techniques. Therefore, he would start with a direct attack and then better plan his moves. However, June, feeling his body slightly adrenaline-fueled, murmured, "This is fun." That wasn't enough of a reason for him to lose. Albion, who had suggested killing June first after being sought out by Cheng, did not move at all. "Do not be afraid." The assassins on the far right attacked at a speed that kept them on the edge of perception. However, it was fast enough to counterattack. June then swung his sword in a short, controlled motion, instantly decapitating the figures that had made the first move. "He's so fast," Albion thought after seeing how June had killed one of the contestants who made the first move. There was the sound of slicing, and in the next instant, a head flew through the air. The decapitated head and its splattered blood fell to the ground, covered in dirt. First, Jun's gaze turned forward. The rest of the assassins looked at him warily while June stared at them intently, and then his sword's posture changed. No matter how strong they became, in the end, it was meaningless. As always, for June, killing them in the shortest amount of time would help him receive fewer injuries. But the terrain was not favorable, so he quickly used his left hand to pull out several light, smoke and sound bombs. Boom! 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 In an instant, everyone was blinded by these bombs. No one knew what was happening, but most of them retreated. June, who had closed his eyes, was unaffected. His gaze had created a three-dimensional map of where each of his enemies was located. Attack. Chapter 24, A Battle of Endurance. June needed to face his opponents intelligently, so instead of charging in like a headless chicken, he began to run in a specific direction where he planned to kill half of the participants. Those who managed to recover quickly followed June, who was probably already thinking about his next strategy. Realistically, the others would be more cautious in following him. Those now trailing behind were the impulsive ones who believed they had the upper hand due to their numbers. But they would soon discover that things were not as they expected. Clang! 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 June stopped, but as he did, he threw several daggers, many of which were blocked by the assassins, but a few pierced the flesh of thighs and other areas that would affect their battle performance. Knives. A 20-year-old man pulled the knife out of his abdomen while looking at June incredulously. "I wouldn't have done that." June unsheathed his sword again and prepared for the attack. In front of him were 7 targets, none of whom were on his level. "Let's attack, there are 7 of us!" shouted the first brave man who rushed into battle. Soon, the others followed. Clang! 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 The sound of steel clashing against steel soon filled the dark forest. There was no escape, and today only one would become the new Black Moon that would explore the world. A boy from Tree's village, Li, felt his heart sink at the spectacle unfolding before his eyes. His companions, those with whom he had made a pact, fell dead after being beheaded. An unrealistic sight, knowing they were all from the Haiyue Clan. Their swords were shattered, the pride in their hands crushed, their skins were cut, and blood soon flooded the ground that was once dry. It would be rational to think the sword blade would break, but he couldn't understand why Jun's sword showed no signs of change. Crack! 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 The heads of his allies fell to the ground. The expression on his face, when his village brother's head rolled in his direction, was one of shock, as if he couldn't believe his brother had died. With a crunch, Li lifted his head. At the end of his gaze was a mysterious man who had turned his brother into a decapitated corpse. Supposedly, those from the Haiyue clan were only 15 years old, and Jun was no exception. Jun's black robe fluttered with his movements, those blood-red eyes on his clothing seemed to come to life when they were bathed in blood. His hair whipped in the wind as he continued killing. With his face covered, Jun didn't need to fake an expression, he simply did what he had to do, not making it easy for those who wanted to take his life. "We're all going to die," Li murmured, seeing Jun getting closer and closer to his position. At first glance, those eyes seemed lethargic. However, if you looked closer, you could see a boiling ferocity swirling in them. Li could immediately understand the identity of that boy who killed without hesitation, he was just an orphan. A life-stalking monster. Then, another thought crossed his mind as if it were a natural fact, "I'm going to die here." He and his brother, who had sworn to kill the others and then have a final duel, would die without even knowing who would reach the final. That thought didn't come to his mind by chance, it was something that instinctively came to him. His body trembled, he felt suffocated, and his vision blurred. "I must retreat." Li naturally took a step back. He gritted his teeth and tried to control himself, but even that was not easy. Avenging his brother, the long-cherished desire of his kin, and other secondary thoughts faded from his mind. His mind focused on one emotion, an emotion he had long forgotten and struggled to remember. Fear. The moment he met Haiyue Jun, the moment he saw those fierce eyes, fear overwhelmed his entire being. Although he tried to remain calm and assess his strength, the conclusion did not change. His body was more powerful than ever. He was brimming with strength, so much that he doubted it was truly his. This phenomenon occurs according to the rules etched in this space. However, this did not guarantee victory. Even if his physical strength had become greater, he could not launch any attack. There was no technique that could stop Jun's sword, which would pierce his heart. Li knew this. The reason everyone had agreed to form a temporary alliance was because they knew that in every ceremony, there was always one from the Haiyue village who was a monster, and this time was no exception. Everyone needed to attack simultaneously if they wanted to win. Then a thought crossed his mind. Run. However, that was also impossible. Obviously, he would be faster. His body was brimming with energy, and he was far from that monster, but he was convinced a sword would come flying from behind, even if he decided to flee far away. Jun's calm demeanor reaffirmed that belief. In the end, the conclusion reached through reason only served to turn the fear weighing on Li's heart into absolute despair. Once again, his feet returned to his control. Li's eyes turned to his allies who were still alive. "We can't beat him." Li could see through them that everyone else present had reached the same conclusion. This was not a battle they could win. The next moment, Jun's voice echoed as he cleaned his sword. "Aren't you coming?" It was like the howl of a beast. When Li heard the voice of the apostles, it was the first thought that came to mind. Li shuddered at the voice and noticed that Jun was looking at him with a subtle smile. Seeing this, he felt anger bubbling up from deep within his heart. Only 2 of the 6 who were originally fighting remained, 4 bodies lay lifeless on the ground. "I am Li from Tree's village." Li gathered strength, and as he shouted, the others also stepped forward. The smile deepened on Jun's lips as he saw this. Li, who felt desperate once again upon seeing this, shook off the emotion and extended his sword to aim for Jun's head, who shifted his stance. It was a frantic attempt. It was a pathetic move. And ultimately, it was a move that could not reach him. Clang! 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 Jun raised his sword. A sword that was only lifted when Li's blade extended towards his neck. In a fierce counterattack, Jun's sword cut off Li's hands. It was a sound he did not hear through his ears but resonated directly inside his head. The field of vision widened. The sound accompanying it also echoed endlessly. Li's eyes widened, and he gaped as if they were about to break while watching his wrists being cut off in front of him. A moment that felt like an eternity. In the end, when Li returned to reality, his body was writhing in pain. Arg. June swung his sword at terrifying speed, and in a quick turn, cut off another head, eliminating the sixth enemy who was about to attack. 6. Jun's breathing returned to normal, and he soon felt the weight of his exhaustion taking over his muscles. Li was the last one alive, so June, who did not wish to torture his opponents, walked towards him to finish this. I was only fulfilling my brother's wishes. June looked at the boy who had the same symbols as Li, then glanced at him and said, and now he's dead. We don't always get what we want. Everyone will come for you. That's what I was hoping for. Fortunately, I've cut their number in half, so now it will be a fairer fight, don't you think? Now that I think about it, I feel like a true protagonist in a story written by some guy. You're crazy. Clang. June swung his sword and pierced Li's heart. He felt with his hands as the life left this person's body, then took a deep breath. I'll have to do better, killing like this will leave me traumatized. The surroundings were a mess, but June did not despair and walked slowly in another direction, waiting to be found later. Chapter 25, A Rest. We shouldn't have split up, that wasn't the damn plan. Chang was furious that everything had gone wrong, still baffled by where June had gotten those artifacts. It's supposed to be a ceremony, how dare that guy bring weapons like that? Albion looked at these shameless assassins and, in a mocking tone, said, we're attacking him with 17 assassins at once, and you still have the nerve to complain about the opponent's methods. You're right, from my perspective, this is all fair. Come on, we're not that far. In a more open field, June sat down to catch his breath while letting his muscles, which had tensed up greatly, relax. There wasn't much to do but wait, he knew he'd be found soon. What a mess, but all of this is better than trying to escape the Azura village without authorization, June thought, knowing how heavily guarded Azura village was to ensure that people like him never escaped. June didn't understand codes, nor did he know exactly why the Haiyue clan still strived to remain strong if they never interfered with the outside world. But what he did know was that if he broke the rules, he would die. Facing veteran assassins is more brutal than dealing with people with the same level of experience as him. Even so, killing is not pleasant. At this moment, June did not feel motivated, he simply killed for purposes that did not fulfill him much. When would the time come to use his sword for something he truly desired? He's around here, quickly. June stood up, looked at his arms covered in cuts, and tied a bandage to stop the bleeding. Superficial cuts, but I'll expose myself to greater harm if I prolong this battle any further. We've got you. You won't escape. But I was waiting for you, you bunch of idiots. I can't believe it, they're such big fools. June, with his scarf lowered from his face, pulled it back up, looked at Cheng among the group of enemies, and felt disappointed. He had expected more from that fool when he didn't attack him without thinking in the trial, but now that he was doing these things, it really disappointed him. How about we take a breather? June shouted, still somewhat exhausted. Albion smiled and asked from afar, will 10 minutes be okay? That's more than enough. I promise we'll finish everything here. June spoke as if he hadn't just killed 7 of his pursuers. Cheng gritted his teeth, this wouldn't work, as if June recovered, the likelihood of him killing them all would only increase. We need to move, he's tired now, this is our chance. Are you that afraid of June? Albion found the bodies of the other assassins, but all of them were truly disappointing in combat. It's not that. Didn't you just see him now? He has many tricks up his sleeve, we don't know what else he could pull out to harm us, but we're still wasting time here. Cheng thought he could take advantage of everyone and attack when June was dead, but his plan wasn't going as expected. The others were weak, we are not. We're not scared of that idiot, said another boy who sat down to take a break. They could do nothing more than sit down, undoubtedly, this was the most disappointing blood ceremony in history. June couldn't say that, right now, he was preparing his second weapon, specifically developed for situations like this, where he needed time to eliminate several opponents. It was the famous green smoke bomb, one that would rob them all of their vision, giving June many chances to win this battle without getting wounded. All right, we can begin. June, who was pulling various things out of his backpack, stood up when he heard these words, looked at the 9 remaining assassins, and muttered, cowards with fear, what a surprise. What did you say? Come on, let's finish this, June said as he pulled up his scarf to avoid inhaling smoke when things got ugly. There was no reason to be fair, this wasn't a story where honor brought a person eternal life or anything like that. June knew his odds, winning a fight when it's 1 against 9 assassins is madness. Alright, let's resume where we left off. Cheng gritted his teeth, unsheathed his sword, and seriously wondered if continuing to attack June was the best idea he could think of. No, I won't be a coward. Chapter 26, Better Than Planned. Today is a good day to die, shouted June, who drew his sword and prepared to attack. Everyone rushed at him faster than he had anticipated moving. June still had his hands raised to the sky, posing as if this were a great action scene, which it was, with the only downside being that everyone wanted to kill him. It's an honor to know I scare them so much, given I was a useless good-for-nothing until recently. This feeling of greatness is delightful, I should do things like this more often, June thought, letting these idiots come closer to him. Cheng hadn't attacked. He stayed back, thinking about what June was doing, and just as he was about to help him, he noticed a strange smoke beneath Jun's feet. That lunatic! A strong gust whistled around them as it transformed into something like a green ocean, completely enveloping all their attackers. Boom! The explosion released a green smoke that left everyone blind. Arg! This was a demonstration of a real fight using brains. And this was just the beginning. Jun's dark silhouette stood out against that green ocean like a reef block. He remained still like a stone pillar in the midst of moving waves. Then, a deep roar was heard. The assassin's offensive had become more intense instead of stopping. A thin figure flew up into the sky. It seemed as if this figure had begun to dance gracefully over the waves of that green ocean. In fact, it looked like this figure wanted to do something amid the green smoke waves that spread across the open terrain. Then he raised his hand and unleashed countless attacks on the position where June had originally been. Suddenly, a figure appeared behind him and pierced his heart. Are they already turning on each other? Interesting. Well, this is a much fairer fight, June thought, watching as some of his attackers began fighting among themselves. What June didn't know was that they were actually fighting because they didn't know where he was, causing some to mistake figures they encountered head-on. Well, whatever the case, June was benefiting from it. But June knew he couldn't remain entrenched in that green ocean. And Albion, who was the cleverest of all the participants, was finally forced to make a move. I hadn't planned on getting involved just yet. Clang! A dark sound was heard as his long sword crossed, and an extremely oppressive aura emanated from him. Slowly and steadily, he positioned himself at the center of the green smoke, waiting for small opportunities to kill anyone who crossed his path. Everyone went mad in this fight where their eyes were useless. Aura-covered swords clashed, and some flew off from the powerful impacts. People watching from outside the green smoke were getting ready to join the battle as well. We must move too, we can't just stand here. Clang! Cheng, who hadn't made a move in a long time, attacked the two figures that had stayed back. His first strike cut one assassin's throat, but it wasn't fast enough to kill the second. Cheng's swords would have pierced his defenses had he been just a bit faster, but it was enough to create a balanced situation. I knew we shouldn't have trusted you. Cheng raised his sword and murmured, the numbers have dwindled enough that a clever move is no longer necessary. June now held a favorable position as he launched one counterattack after another. However, Albion tried to regain full control of the situation once more. His delicate sword strikes began to turn more vicious as the intensity of the green smoke lessened. And his smiling expression gradually turned serious. He swung his arms, slicing another figure in half. The battlefield, which had witnessed a fierce and terrifying fight, had suddenly become unexpectedly pleasing to look at. June, who stayed more on the sidelines, took advantage of the moment to kill anyone who was distracted, but still, he did not expose himself enough, waiting for better opportunities. Arg! The last screams were heard as the smoke lost its intensity, revealing Albion standing while holding someone by the neck. June didn't move, instead, he analyzed the area, looking for more enemies. All dead, only the three of us remain. June was fascinated by this, he didn't expect the confusion to have eliminated 7 more participants, leaving only the 3 of them. Albion looked at Cheng with some wounds on his body, his gaze passing beyond where he saw 2 corpses, one of which belonged to another of his village companions. In the end, you're not a cowardly manipulator. Still, you know it would be more advantageous to team up to kill June. Albion wasn't a fool, he knew that facing June right now would leave him with some serious injuries that he'd prefer to avoid. Cheng looked at Albion, then at June, shook his head, and said, "You can go to hell, I'll fight my way." This is getting more interesting, I'm getting more excited by the minute. If everyone could see Jun's face, they would notice his wide grin, because for him, moving from a disadvantageous situation to this was a step only a god could make. Was he really that smart? Damn, everything had gone perfectly for him, but now they had a more serious situation on their hands. Albion was strong, Cheng seemed to want revenge, and June didn't know which side to take first. Shall we take a breather? We won't fall for it a second time. Chapter 27, The Last Battle? Cheng was the first to move, Albion wasn't far behind, and June, who unfortunately had to move as well, didn't lag behind either. Clang! 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 Jun's expression grew solemn as he looked at his opponents. He even forgot the pain from his wounds for a moment. The three of them had different styles when it came to swordplay, and this was evident in each strike as their styles kept changing with the intent of catching their rivals off guard. They all moved swiftly, advancing and retreating at a rapid pace, dodging and weaving with agility. Their minds slowly replayed everything their eyes saw. It was clear that they were modifying their own styles in response to their opponents. They were using each other's strength to compensate for their own weaknesses. June had been doing this from the start, killing everyone by modifying his fighting styles so that they couldn't defend or adapt to him immediately. Albion was strong, he moved his hand holding the sword like a snake seeking Jun's neck, which June narrowly dodged, receiving a fierce wound on his shoulder. Then, a flash of silver-white sword light closed in on Albion, cutting his chest. This light came from Cheng's sword, who hadn't stayed behind in the fight. A sharp whistle was heard as Cheng approached, showcasing his great skills in swordsmanship. June, of course, was entirely different. The pressure he exerted on both of them seemed as if he wanted to be attacked simultaneously by Cheng and Albion, who instinctively moved to strike him. If I were you, I'd look to the side. Cheng heard these whispering words from June, and at that moment, he sensed a threat. He turned and found a fierce attack from Albion coming his way. Clang! Both swords clashed, and June, who had distanced himself, stomped the ground hard to rejoin the fight before it was too late to seize any advantages. Stronger, faster! June appeared beside Albion, his sword moving fiercely toward his enemy's head. Albion, who was being attacked from two places at once, wanted to retreat but had to make a choice, take the damage from Cheng's attack while defending himself from June, who was far more dangerous. Clang! It was as if two meteors had set off from different points but were about to collide on Earth. But at that moment, June, who was enjoying the fight, stopped, savoring that feeling of unease inside him. What's happening? June asked himself as he assumed a defensive stance. The intensity was noticeably lower for Cheng and Albion, who both headed toward June this time, slightly confused as he didn't know what was unsettling him. Clang! The sound of Jun's sword clashing fiercely against Cheng's was heard as the two crossed paths. The imposing force crushed all the attacks directed at him. Crack! 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 Backing away, June threw several knives with his left hand, and they all struck his two rivals. Cheng fell to the ground, spinning. He staggered a dozen steps back before finally stopping. A thick trail of blood flowed from his limbs, pierced by the knives. His complexion was pale, and his black tunic had been torn in many places from the battle wounds he had sustained. June, damn you, we're in a fair fight! Cheng shouted, angered by Jun's attacks. Clang! 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 June had no time to respond as Albion's attacks came down on him at numerous non-vital points, and because of that, many succeeded. But as Albion was about to continue his attacks, he felt something and retreated, only then did the sword in Jun's hands get close enough to pierce his left leg. Crack! The carnage erupted, leaving Albion in a terrible state, his gaze quickly filled with anxiety, but June stopped to catch his breath. This pause felt like something agreed upon, everyone knew it was needed. A moment to breathe, so they gave themselves a few minutes. If you let me kill you, the battle would end now, June murmured, removing the band from his forehead to stop the bleeding from one of his arms. I will win. Cheng stood up, he hadn't removed the knives lodged in critical areas of his body, believing this way he would bleed less. Chapter 28, 3 Dead and 1 Alive. The battle was about to resume. Albion snorted as he took the initiative to speak. Cheng, if you want to live longer, we must kill June first. This is not about cowardice or honor, he has none of that and made it very clear that he will kill us by any means necessary. Cheng thought about it. He had come second in the test 4 years ago in the dark, in an easy section compared to June, who had been in a place where there wasn't enough food to survive a whole year. Besides, in this fight, June had no honor, no one did. Chang didn't know why he had betrayed his thoughts at the last minute and started competing as he should have from the beginning, but he was gaining nothing from it. June closely followed their expressions, his eyes showed no despair, and instead, he smiled warmly, "You talk about honor, and all of you plan to kill me at the start of the test. What a shame. I'd kill myself if I were you." He wasn't thinking about it. June felt uneasy, but not because of this battle, but because of something even more disturbing. His instincts never failed him, they were always reliable, and when something unexpected was about to happen, he knew it in advance. June had called this his spider sense, recalling a similar ability that belonged to a man dressed in red who swung between skyscrapers. But back to the main point, June was buying time now because he was waiting for something. The blood ceremony was supposed to be important, there shouldn't have been any surprises, so June ruled out any other kind of attack. The problem had to be somewhere in the surroundings. June knew he had missed something. What was it? This battle was the most important final battle for June. Therefore, it had to be the most splendid. He needed his attacks to be authoritative, but now, with that unease, he had to be more cautious. Chang raised his sword, his trembling, aching hand was weakening, so he knew he couldn't continue with such an intense battle. That's why he looked at June and then said, "I'll kill Albion, don't interfere." For the first time, June showed surprise in his gaze. What was this? Are you crazy? Even if you win, you'll die at the hands of that bastard. Albion hadn't expected his plans to take this direction, which made him very angry. Chang shook his head. He had always been the best until he met June, and then everything went downhill. "I'm not that kind of person, my father wouldn't have wanted that." "Fine, then I'll kill you first." Clang! At that moment, the battle between Chang and Albion resumed, their attacks fiercer than before. Chang regretted suggesting killing June first, his desire to win and cleanse his stained honor had completely blinded his way of being. He now wanted to defeat June by fair means. He wanted to be remembered for that if he died, not as a damn coward. That's why he would kill Albion here, or at least try. He would do everything possible to inflict lethal wounds so that June, the one who deserved it, would win this ceremony. What a spectacle! June didn't know exactly what was happening, maybe it was redemption syndrome. Something common in bad people who repent for their sins. Undoubtedly, these things didn't happen in real life, at least it had never happened to him, and he believed few people actually experienced this. But at the moment when Chang was taking the advantage, June saw a few bodies on the ground showing signs of movement. "They're alive!" Chang reacted to Jun's shout, but it was too late. By the time he realized, there were two assassins attacking his sword with theirs. Crack! Crack! June watched as Chang was killed and then saw two more figures rise from the ground. "Did you plan to kill me if I won the fight? That wasn't the deal, idiots." Albion went mad when he saw that the plan had been delayed longer than expected. "We were hoping the Azura boy would approach, but he is very cautious." Then, June, who thought the battle would be easy to win, fell once again into a bottomless abyss. Chapter 29, Not Counting the Numbers. This is a damn heart-stopping surprise. June, who hadn't expected to see more people alive, watched as two figures rose from the ground. "Yet, well, I couldn't trust the guy from your village, and I was right." Albion felt a satisfying relief but knew that June was still in good condition and shouldn't be taken lightly. June, on the other hand, hadn't worried about them since they had injuries to tend to, and he hadn't expected this to be Albion's pre-planned scheme. Albion, Yao and Mu didn't dare underestimate Jun's ability to handle them all. They quickly changed positions. They took their respective places in a fraction of a second and prepared to attack in sequence. They hadn't consulted a predetermined attack plan. But weren't they three assassins with a history of countless battles? Previously, they had stationed themselves very informally in different locations. However, each of them had positioned themselves in a way that allowed coordination with the other two. Moreover, their positioning had been such that it was more suitable in relation to Jun's position. June dashed forward, and his figure began to blur. He was at his fastest when he came into attack. Albion snorted and launched an explosive attack in response with his sword. June quickly stepped back from his powerful charge toward Albion. In fact, he slid over the gravel and moved to the side. A figure had been positioned behind June earlier. Suddenly, Two knives shot toward June from Albion's back. Meanwhile, seeing the coordinated way in which he was being attacked, June drew his short sword to hold in his left hand to better dodge the attacks. Jun's long red sword was drawn once again. It lunged through Yao's waist and went straight for the chest of the guy named Mu, who couldn't react in time. A lethal attack for both, this strike enveloped around 5 meters of area around Yao's torso. This was the most important battle of his life. He wasn't going to hold back anything in a death match against assassins. Crack! Crack! June had moved to the side but quickly turned around and re-entered the fray with great speed. He took a neutral stance with the help of his momentum when he returned. Then he unleashed a fierce attack from the side. The three assassins had attacked without prior discussion, but their attacks were perfectly coordinated. Their attacks seemingly aimed at vital areas of Jun's body, but now only two were moving. These attacks seemed quite simple at first. But June was very aware that they could turn into a torrent of complicated strikes. One of his opponents would trap him in no time. Then he and others would use their respective moves to get rid of him while one of them held him trapped. June had to face the combined attacks of possibly the two strongest competitors in this contest. That's why he didn't dare be careless. He roared loudly as his body began to spin. First, he avoided Albion's direct attacks. Then, his black tunic whirled in the air as June narrowly missed the sword strike. After that, he turned and leaned to one side in a simultaneous move. Apparently, he hadn't recovered from the cuts he had inflicted when he gravely wounded Yao, who strangely still hadn't died. Drugs. June thought as he saw Yao getting up after lying on the ground for some time. Still, June remained quite calm in the face of the combined attacks of these three tenacious enemies. Clang! 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 He had deflected their attacks in the blink of an eye. Moreover, he didn't stand idle against these attacks and had managed to counterattack in return. Albion grated his teeth and quickened his pace. He knew that one of them would have to suffer even more injuries from enduring Jun's fierce attacks head-on. Only then would the others have a chance to deliver a fatal blow. The others didn't seem to have the courage, or enough of it, to contribute in that regard. In any case, their injuries wouldn't give them much time to finish this battle. So Albion had to do it himself. It was Albion's immense hatred for June that drove him to make such reckless decisions. A loud clanging of metal was heard. Jun's expression turned cold. He quickly withdrew and threw two sound bombs, stunning the three of them. Boom! Boom! The explosions were enough for June to take the initiative to sever Yao's head, who barely managed to react due to his severe torso wound. Meanwhile, Mu quickly repositioned to counterattack, but it wasn't fast enough, and the short dagger in Jun's left hand pierced one of his lungs. Albion, who had recovered from the stun, frowned as he saw that only he remained alive against a fatigued June. His plan had worked, now he just needed to kill him. Two shadows flashed on the battlefield, strewn with fallen bodies. One more! June murmured as he charged at Albion, who then didn't know how to attack. June was desperate, this attack would be the last. There was no technique in Jun's attacks, so Albion didn't know how to respond to that assault. Crack! I'm strong too, Albion told himself as he prepared to counterattack. However, in the same second, when June appeared behind Albion and his sword continued to spin, ready to strike, no one could see this movement that was the pinnacle of the blood moon dance. A second later, as if Jun's sword craved blood, it advanced towards Albion's neck and pierced with force, carving its way to his mouth like a fierce lance. Everything stopped, the tip of Jun's sword, which had pierced Albion, dripped with blood. Mercilessly, June lifted his foot and hurled Albion's corpse forward. The force with which he threw Albion's body was such that it spun several times, breaking apart. Crack! 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 That would be all. June murmured, beginning to breathe heavily. His lungs, which were about to collapse, were recovering. Jun's technique required uninterrupted execution, even the air in his lungs had to stop. But the results were splendid, far beyond what an ordinary human could achieve. Chapter 30, The New Black Moon. June spent several minutes trying to recover, his blurred gaze looked at his blood-stained hand, and only then did he smile. I'm June, 14 years old, and I've survived this blood ceremony. The words June had always wanted to say out loud lifted an invisible weight off his shoulders, and just to be sure, he stabbed the hearts of all these competitors. Crack! 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 Few understand the feeling of having always fought alone and won alone, it's what defines being superior. He had fully adapted to this world, something that few could do. Knowing he had completed the ceremony, June took a rocket from his chest and ignited it. Boom! The explosion in the sky lit up the surrounding darkness for a few seconds, signaling to the Haiyue clan members that there was a winner. It had never been used ahead of time, there were severe consequences for doing so. June wasn't worried about more competitors hiding. He knew that one of the rules of this blood ceremony was no hiding. Those who hid to avoid being found once the signal was launched would be killed. Easier than I expected, though with some inconveniences. June wandered aimlessly away from the bodies lying on the ground. It could be said that he was now a free man, someone who could experiment with many things and discover what to obsess over. He hadn't thought about much while he was here, but now that he had the opportunity to prove he could live in different ways outside this forest, it excited him a bit. At that moment, June heard a lot of noise, and in an instant, numerous figures appeared and stopped at a distance from him. June of the Azura village, 15 years ago, the 9 crescent moons of this era witnessed your victory and accepted your position as the new Black Moon. June showed the utmost respect by kneeling before the great crescent moons. Despite the pain, he did as expected of him. You have 20 years to explore the world, you may wield any power and support any current king. But you are forbidden from revealing the location of the villages or passing on our techniques. I'm bleeding out, do you think this is the best time? Did you say something? Asked the man who had been explaining all the rules. June shook his head and said, I will follow the old traditions, just as all of you once did. That's enough. Astaroth walked over to where June was and struck him at specific points, causing him to lose consciousness. When June fell unconscious, Astaroth picked him up and began to leave. He used those otherworldly weapons. Well, I'm sure he wouldn't have used them if everyone hadn't attacked him alone. Astaroth wasn't concerned about this as he walked back to the cabin. The man walking beside him was named Max. He had no issues with Astaroth, so he said, he did a good job. I hear they'll soon select who will be assigned to him once he starts his journey. Are you referring to the woman from the Haiyue clan? Who else? I'd bet they'll fight. I can't argue against that bet. That night was one of the longest June had ever had. He woke up a week later, fully healed, and looked around in surprise. I guess you're fully recovered. June looked at Astaroth, who was sitting not far from him, and asked, how long did I sleep? A week, less than I expected, but it's more than enough. Are you leaving already? June was surprised, wondering what he was supposed to do now. You have 1,000 gold coins in that sack, food for a week, maps, weapons as requested, and a world to explore. If you're prudent, you won't leave illegitimate children where I'd rather you didn't go. That would save him from ROA's concerns about your children being bastards, said Astaroth, standing by the door. June nodded slightly, still a bit dazed, and asked, am I a crescent moon now? Outside the village, you are a black moon. When you return, you will receive the title of crescent moon, though it's basically the same. Then, thank you. You will be accompanied by the twins. They will be good company, they will be assigned as your guardians during the first months and then return to the village. Understood. If you work for any kind of king, remember where you come from and who you are. Understood, sir. Good luck. And thus, Jun's uncertain journey began, where after many years he hoped to find a more decent way to live. Chapter 31, The Outside World. At the beginning of summer, as the sun began to rise, a layer of mist enveloped the village on the outskirts of Qin's largest cities, revealing what might have been the most orderly village in the entire kingdom. To the north of the village lay the Sword Mountain. A cluster of extraordinarily magnificent palaces was hidden in that mountain, and before them was a massive waterfall. These palaces were guarded by men in black uniforms, each of them carrying bows on their backs and swords at their waists. Hundreds of men could be seen standing guard, none of them seemed to doubt this duty, remaining in place as was expected of them. The symbol on the flags in this place was an eye within a rectangle. Many feared this flag because it had been seen everywhere in the rural areas of Qin for the past 6 months. When June set foot in the outside world, he did not hesitate to search for good subordinates to serve him. He did not have much time, so he chose a group of bandits with minor crimes in their histories. Trevor recommended settling in one of the palaces Qin had near the Azura village. It was in this way that, from a base, they began to eliminate bandits, criminals who thought they could get away with their crimes, and many other lunatics. June, who enjoyed this work, discovered he was being paid for it, so he went on to create a private army in the best way he knew, while also putting slaves to work. These slaves were criminals. June would often buy slaves and offer them freedom after they had paid him back with a certain amount of labor. It might take them many years to pay it off, but it was better than being a slave for life. Knowing the ways in which a man could gain power, June established his own mercenary organization, working under Qin with the sole purpose of bringing security back to the most defenseless villages. But don't get it wrong, June was no hero, he was merely taking advantage of situations for his own benefit. All the villages flying his flag were protected, and in return, they provided a steady supply of arrows, food, and textiles. Security in those times was the best thing that could have happened to the villages, crimes had ended, and justice prevailed. This was how June had been working during this period while looking for something to do. It turned out that in those years, there were more wars than days in the year. Main Hall. June was training new recruits, who would be chosen for the Archer Division, knowing beforehand what their specialties were. Not everyone was talented in warfare, so he focused on the youngest to explore their talents more deeply. You will shoot arrows until your fingers bleed, understood? Trevor asked in a deep voice. It turned out June couldn't distance himself from the twins when the clans learned what he was doing, so they supported him by sending more guards to this place. Any news? June was bored, everything was very repetitive these days. Lord, we have news. Maybe I shouldn't have asked. June muttered, slightly annoyed. It is reported that they have chosen the Haiyue, her name is Ren. Is she pretty? Sir. June felt slightly embarrassed for asking such an out-of-place question. Lately, he found himself saying things instead of just thinking them. Continue with the information, this is of utmost importance. Understood. The messenger unfolded the information letter in front of June and said, Ren is described as a very dark and somber person. Raised to be an assassin, she had become ruthless, almost devoid of any feelings. She is arrogant, cruel, and uses stealth tactics to secure victory. Nothing new, is that all? June imagined that if they ever met, they would surely try to kill each other. It is said that in the Q tribe, a 13-year-old clan member has escaped after being ordered to commit suicide for missing the tournament. Her name is Kyukai, she fled after massacring many of her clan's elders, and her whereabouts are unknown. Jun's eyes showed surprise as he asked, are the elders of the Haiyue clan so weak? Either that, or she is very skilled with the sword. Lu, who had survived the trial alongside June, appeared at the back with another urgent message. Keep me informed of any new developments, I would be interested in meeting that girl. You're never interested in anything, said Vera, who had just arrived at the meeting after training his men. Why the interest now? Lin was confused, June didn't usually behave like this. Trevor looked at the messenger and said, he's looking for a place to sow his seed. All crescent moons do it, it's no surprise he's looking for a strong woman. You have a golden opportunity, I think you should take it. Lin, on the side, remained confused. What is this about sowing the seed? That's all. June nodded slightly and said, let's move on. Lin, any news? Well, this is. If it's about the seed, you can relax, no one is bothered by it. It bothers me. Can we stop talking about the damned seed for a moment? I think my bells aren't ready yet, June replied casually. They were all men, some would think about it, some would not, but for now, it was fun to talk about the bells. After everyone fell silent, Lin murmured, because you refused to help the new king of Qin, he will send you to war through a formal request. I am not his soldier. June was annoyed by the current king of Qin's audacity, he still didn't know that June could take his head if he wanted to. But June wasn't so angry as to do that, he recalled a message that had arrived about a request for help. Later, he found out that there had been a coup attempt, the current king's brother's faction tried to take the throne, but it didn't go well. June, at that time, was busy killing bandits, helping the development of villages, and creating a private army. When is this war supposed to be? He would need to move in a week to make it on time. Who are we fighting against? Wei invaded a city that Qin took some time ago, and now a campaign is forming to retake that city and the head of the general in charge. June nodded slightly and thought it might be good to get some fresh air, he might even find the criminal who had the courage to massacre her clan. I admire her a lot, and I haven't even met her yet, June thought lightly. He had never dared to attack anyone for his freedom, but he saw that she had been able to do so. Chapter 32, The Haiyue Campaign. In the vast corridors of history, where the footprints of the past intertwine with the faded dreams of men, there stands a grim and moving tale of what was and what was not. In its pages, the roar of conflicts has echoed throughout centuries, blurring the lines between civilization and barbarism, revealing a humanity trapped in its own snare of self-destruction. War, a monster with 1,000 faces that does not distinguish between civilizations, has been the constant backdrop of the human saga. Beyond its visible consequences of devastation and ruin, war is a visceral experience that affects both the body and the mind of the individuals caught in its vortex. Prolonged stress, relentless violence, and immense suffering create a devastated landscape not only on the battlefield but also in the innermost fibers of human existence. Physiological reactions to conflict, such as the excessive release of adrenaline and cortisol, serve as silent witnesses to a story written in blood and sweat. From the golden thrones of kings to the desolate camps of soldiers, the narrative of war reveals a cycle of ruthless decisions and insatiable sacrifices. Leaders, cloaked in power and ambition, orchestrate strategies that unleash storms of suffering, ignoring the human cost in terms of physical and psychological health. These monarchs, often distant from the brutal realities of conflict, represent the rise and fall of a system that perpetuates chaos while proclaiming glory. In every corner of this war story, there is a dark echo that resonates with a fundamental truth: the capacity for violence is inscribed in the darkest folds of human nature. As battles are fought and empires crumble, a terrifying paradox is revealed: humanity, despite its potential for greatness, remains trapped in an endless cycle of destruction and regeneration. History becomes a mirror of human fragility and strength, a reminder of the biological and moral limitations that challenge our evolution. Boss, are you sure about this? Trevor looked at June, who was lost in his thoughts while reading the war notices. What exactly do you mean? We're traveling on donkeys. When do you think we'll reach the battlefield? June looked at Trevor and said, when it's time. Let's take our time. If the current king of Qin likes to play politics, I think I know a thing or two about that as well. Well, that should be fine. We'll have to walk at times. I even think we might need to carry the donkeys at some point. June lightly shook the reins of his donkey, named Starfish, and their journey toward that famous campaign to which they had been invited began. He didn't know how far it was, but one thing was certain: they had to travel to the border with Wei to fight a war that this kingdom had brought upon itself. Don't you have stories to tell while we travel? Trevor was bored, which was unusual for him, but in recent months he had grown accustomed to a more interactive lifestyle, training his soldiers, and now, traveling alone with June on a donkey was slightly dull. June thought about it and said, I'll tell you about war. Trevor waited patiently, knowing that June liked to remain silent at times to think about what to say. If he didn't think carefully, he might say something outrageous that could trigger any kind of reaction. The War of 500 Years, also known as the Warring States period of spring and autumn. In this era, precisely, we live in an unrelentingly harsh world. One might say a dragon has invaded. A dragon called the era. Desire, pain, pleasure, despair, fear. The dragon slithers through China, devouring everything in its path. And what drips from its gleaming body is blood and passion. June, speaking in a neutral tone, paused for a long moment and said, we are in that era, but fortunately, I think we are at the end of these 500 years of war. Really? Trevor's eyes showed suspicion, but after realizing it was June who said it, he silently accepted the possibility. June had brought good inventions to the nearby villages, made fair deals with merchants by selling their products, and within less than 6 months, he was generating a good amount of wealth. All of it, for better or worse, was being invested in weapons, research, and territory development. June was unpredictable, his personality was not clear. Perhaps because he had not yet found his destiny, he was like a free fish in a long river, waiting to find one of his best options to deviate from what he had planned. Maybe participating in this campaign would be different, something that could improve his state of mind. Is that a donkey? Ha, ha, ha. At this pace, you'll reach the border with Wei in years. June looked at a group of children mocking his starfish. He was about to draw his sword, but Trevor stopped him, reminding him, they're just kids. Damn it, I'm a kid too, I'm 14. June was angry because they mocked his donkey, not himself. He was worried his donkey might suffer some sort of depression that would prevent it from continuing their journey. You are anything but a kid. Trevor smiled warmly as he waved goodbye to the children, but when his gaze shifted, the children who were mocking them ran away in fear. June, on the other hand, returned to his calm demeanor and said, I'm thinking we should have come on horseback. I didn't mention that. It's hot. I didn't mention that either. Chapter 33, The Infernal Sun. June was dressed this time in a simple white tunic. Neither he nor Trevor wore armor, at least not visibly, their special gear was stored in a woolen bag. Drawing attention in these places wasn't advisable, especially when they might encounter numerous bandits along the way. Have you heard that the men of the mountains are led by a beautiful woman? Trevor found an interesting topic to talk about as they continued on their path. June, who was reclining under a straw umbrella, looked up and said, I thought about going to investigate and see if our ages were compatible for having children. Then I assumed further and believed she might try to kill me if I suggested anything. You're really something else. Trevor was left speechless by Jun's statement, thinking he needed to get him out of the mountains more often, or his thoughts would become even more disastrous. Soon, they came across long lines of people still too far away to interact with. Soldiers. No, those are supplies. Makes sense, feeding more than 100,000 people and tens of thousands of horses is no easy task. Trevor observed the food wagons passing by at a fast pace. The problem with war is that it consumes many resources. This is why all kingdoms make strategic pauses during wartime. A kingdom needs a lot of resources to continue a prolonged war. If it drags on longer than a kingdom can bear, it will not only lose the war but its soldiers will desert. It's already complicated to select soldiers. According to June, every able-bodied man must attend war campaigns whenever his region is selected. Dying for nothing. This time, Qin feels violated by losing a city it had conquered long ago and now wants to reclaim it just to assert its authority. It was the typical reaction of a young king. His advisors must have told him that if he did not show his claws, he would be considered weak, lacking the qualities of a king. But even so, this is absurd. These people aren't trained for war, it will be a slaughter. Even Trevor had noticed the problem with the armies. June looked at the supply groups on their way and said, everyone seeks money, honor, and the defense of their family. If Qin falls, they will all be turned into slaves. Damn, I never thought it would be this bad. Trevor began to appreciate his home more. It's true that the Azura village was safe, but June even began to think it wasn't convenient to stay on the sidelines of a war that could change the world. As they approached the border with Wei, June seemed more annoyed by the sun and the lack of trees along the road. Moreover, the outfits provided by the Azura village were black, and June knew this color absorbed the sun's rays, which is why they wore different clothing. We're getting close. June perked up a little. He didn't know what awaited him, but there would definitely be some good fights breaking out non-stop. Trevor smiled because of this. He had been training his soldiers, who were worse than animals at handling swords, and spending time in this place could improve his mood. Sir, what brings you to this place? A man with a long beard approached, asking with some curiosity. We're going to war by invitation from the king of Qin. June wondered what rank he might hold here. He wasn't quite sure whether he would be a cavalry soldier with his donkey, Starfish, or a general of 5,000 men. Either option would be welcomed by June, who, after all, would remain on the sidelines as best he could. When June turned to speak with Trevor, he saw him talking to another man and asked, "What's going on?" "No, he's not my son." "What?" June reacted as if someone had stepped on his tail. He was a black moon, which meant he held higher authority than Trevor, so calling him his son was somewhat insulting. "He's just giving me some advice. My ears are cleaner than a donkey's behind, of course. I heard that old man thinking I was your daughter." June quickened his pace, moving away from the place on his donkey. "I'm only 20 years old." The man muttered, slightly affected. Trevor shook his head and said, "It happens, good luck with the job." Chapter 34, Should I join the cavalry with my donkey? Have you seen them? It's embarrassing. What are they doing riding donkeys? They seem like people of great wealth. What are they doing at the border with Wei? June sat proudly atop his donkey, which had become his best friend alongside Trevor and Vera. He had taken it from some thieves who had intended to eat it. Nowadays, they were inseparable friends. "Look, Starfish, everyone seems to love you," June said, stroking his donkey's neck. Trevor was a bit embarrassed. This was truly an unbelievable sight to behold in a war zone. "Sir, we should report to the general of this army. I don't feel like talking to old men. Let's head straight into the action with the infantry." June didn't want to waste time. He knew his presence on the battlefield could improve the infantry's performance. That's why, as soon as he knew they were in the right place, he led his bold donkey up a small hill. When his eyes made contact with the battlefield, he slowly came to a stop. Wait, you should know that I didn't like that good man calling you my son. Although we're like brothers, you know I respect you, Trevor said after seeing June stopped in the distance. Noticing June was focused on something, he turned his head in the same direction. We made it on time, let's report in. June advanced down the small slope, heading toward where the cavalry should be stationed with his donkey, Starfish. Trevor looked at June and quickly said, somewhat confused, you said we wouldn't get involved. That doesn't mean we avoid unnecessary deaths, June objected to Trevor's words with a subtle smile. I know that smile. Trevor wanted to curse, he knew that June smiled like that when some madness was about to happen, and he didn't want to be part of it. The area June headed to was where the 4th Army of Qin was stationed, or at least a small part of it. Based on what he had seen, this would be the most interesting battle. Currently, Wei's army had taken the 3 hills, positioned high enough that it was impossible for Qin's army to retake the castle that Wei had recovered a few days ago after killing all its inhabitants. General Hiki's tent, commander of 1,000 men. Do you know anything about the state of the war? Shin was having a final conversation with Hiki, a commander of 1,000 men who, together with him, had helped the king of Qin reclaim his throne. The strategy is to retake the hills if they want to continue the war. Honestly, if Wei's army holds those hills, there'd be no need to continue the battle since it would be lost before any other measures are considered outside the 3 hills. It's normal, we arrived too late. The original plan was for Qin to conquer Kiyu, but before they arrived, everything changed due to the information we had at that time. The commander-in-chief, Duke Haiyue, decided to face the Wei troops on these plains. Shin nodded slightly. He was about to say something when suddenly someone entered the tent as if it were a common occurrence. Hey, who are you? Shin immediately went on alert. He looked at the guards at the entrance and was shocked to see them unconscious. June, who had entered the tent, looked at the guards and smiled slightly. I'm very sorry, they're just asleep. I showed them my badge, and they didn't believe the king of Qin himself sent me to this dump. Hiki recognized the badge in Jun's hand and quickly said to Shin, calm down, he's a guest. Bye, do you know this idiot? Shin thought June was an enemy but relaxed when he saw the nervous expression on Bai's face. He is an envoy of King Qin, that's all you need to know for now. June greeted the 2 men and said, I've already sent my assistant to speak with the general in charge of this army. I will be leading the 4th Infantry, so I hope you inform the commanding general. Is it just you and one other person? Hiki knew the badge in Jun's hand. It was one that all nobles would recognize, as it signified death. That's what it meant, death. Qin had issued these badges since ancient times, and it was known that a group of brutal assassins used them. It wasn't common for an assassin of Jun's caliber to be sent to war, but he had heard that when the king of Qin requested help, the current owner of the death badge responded too late. Now that June was here, there was no doubt that the king himself had just challenged death itself. I will notify Commander Fu Hushan of your plans, Hiki said, knowing it was good for someone like June to take charge of the infantry. Shin looked at June and asked, Hey, are you a commander? June pointed at himself, and when Shin nodded, he replied with a broad smile, I think everyone is going to die. This place is full of death, so to avoid that being too easy, I'll be with the infantry. What did you say? Well, this war makes no sense, it's just a fight by the young king trying to assert authority after his brother usurped his throne. June walked over to a chair to sit down. Nobody said anything, the words June had spoken were enough to get him beheaded, but he didn't seem to care. I've seen the soldiers on the way here. Only the cavalry is spared from being pathetic, but even so, their performance in combat would be disappointing. Hey, you! Shin, with his aggressive and direct temperament, wanted to punch June in the face, who seemed to be mocking all of them for fighting for their homeland. Hiki wiped the sweat from his brow and asked, what do you have in mind? I will fulfill my mission by killing the general tonight, but first, for my conscience's sake, I will help the infantry avoid being mostly massacred. June grabbed an apple from the table and walked back the way he came. Hiki said nothing more, he couldn't afford to. If he made a mistake, June wouldn't hesitate to kill him. Of course, June wasn't as bloodthirsty toward people who hadn't committed unforgivable sins. If he had such a bad reputation, it was because of other Black Moons who had committed atrocities in the past. Before leaving, June murmured, I've heard that the general of this army relies heavily on his instincts. Perhaps those instincts have served him well, but the data from his battles is very unfavorable for the army. Chapter 35, The Fate of Obsession. Are you sure it's her? June was very skeptical about the girl dressed in white. Trevor thought for a moment. He couldn't really remember what the women of the Haiyue clan looked like, which is why he couldn't provide a confident answer to this important question. You have no idea, do you? June understood the long, uncomfortable silence. What I think will happen is that both of you will fight to the death if you expose her in front of all the soldiers, and that's not convenient right now, am I right? For the first time in his life, Trevor seemed intelligent. June was right that the twins became idiots when they were together, but now that they were separated as much as possible, each revealed certain strengths that weren't apparent when they acted foolishly together. Then I'll join the infantry. I don't want to put Starfish in danger. Should I change? I don't want to scare her off. The last thing I want is for her to escape and not speak with me again. Trevor nodded slightly and then asked, why do you want to talk to her if not to kill her for the crimes she committed against her clan, which is, in fact, our ally? I don't know. Maybe I don't want to spend the next 20 years of my life in the Qin Kingdom, so if she's looking for something that could give me another purpose, maybe we could travel together. June was bored. Perhaps part of him thought the rebellious girl from the most feared clan of female assassins in the world was just like him. He hadn't found anyone who recalled fragments of information about another life. The only person who came to mind was the creator of Azura Village, with all those strange names. He was the only man who didn't use Oriental characters for all his members' names. June was also afraid of not being able to adapt. He always felt somewhat alone, misunderstood, and yearning for something he couldn't yet define. That's why he would experiment. Tell the commander of this army that I'll be in charge of the infantry. I don't care about leading the cavalry, I'll just be emotional support for those who are about to die. June was realistic about what would happen next. So, after the meeting with that general close to the king of Qin, June went to the soldiers' quarters and saw that there was movement. Is everything about to start? Trevor nodded with little enthusiasm and said, I'm going with the general, you must understand I don't need to be here. You're protecting me. You're not making it easy. Once again, June conceded that Trevor was right. After this brief discussion, he left his donkey in a safe place and headed toward the infantry, where he would meet the assassin girl. He couldn't lie, he felt excited. Would she kill him, or would they talk? He didn't know her yet, but June was already her fan. She had done what he had never dared to do for the sake of survival. I must be cautious. Jun's eyes became serious. War was a place where joy was a fleeting emotion, only found when they achieved victory. But here, nothing was the same because the current general of Qin's army was a lunatic who cared nothing about the deaths of his infantry. He would use whatever methods he deemed necessary to win this battle. After all, his instinct was his greatest weapon. June might appear indifferent, but he cared more than he seemed to. That's why he volunteered to lead the garrison, a task that even his general wouldn't consider at the moment. Shin was watching the battlefield, seeing everyone getting killed, and knowing that his group was next to enter the fray, he couldn't help but feel nervous. There were no orders, no one spoke. All of them, new to this battlefield, were tormented. But at that moment, a rather striking figure entered the line of sight of the nervous soldiers. Attention, everyone! Chapter 36, Documenting the War. Everyone, at least the faction he was in, paid him enough attention to continue. We will enter a field of death where many of us will not make it out alive. Silence filled the battlefield. Shin couldn't help but mutter, is that his damn way of motivating us? Shin, do you know him? Li Piao, Shin's childhood best friend, asked. He was riding a donkey, said this battle was absurd, and mentioned he wasn't interested in participating. Now look at him, wanting to lead us, Shin said, clearly annoyed with June, who was now giving a somewhat questionable speech. Well, I think we need him. Someone like him? He seems to be only 15. Kyukai showed interest in June because she knew he wasn't pretending with that speech, he seemed quite sincere about it, so she said, he's not joking. Shin or that idiot who looks like he's on vacation. Li Piao couldn't help but vent his emotions about June, who had seemed like a fool up until now. June didn't want these men to march to certain death without at least trying to improve their performance. No one understood him, even he couldn't fully understand himself. But now that he had the attention of these fearful soldiers, he said, you should know that we will die, in 100 years, we will all be dead. June didn't include himself in this list, remembering that his life expectancy was a bit longer due to his training, but he didn't think it was appropriate to mention that right now. What you should ask yourselves is, where do you want to die? Here on a battlefield or at home, where you might die of some illness before reaching old age. These last words from June made all those who thought he'd gone mad pay attention. I may not be able to do much with this, but I'll try. June cleared his throat and then shouted, "Attention, infantry, prepare to enter the battlefield." Is he in charge? Aren't the captains supposed to be in charge of their respective groups of 5? I can see the fire in his eyes. June looked at the soldiers in the front row and shouted a question, "What kind of shield wall is that?" What did he say? A shield wall. Formation. I want everyone lined up, your shields stacked side by side, without a single gap. June was using the Viking battle formation, the only way they could manage something decent in the war that was about to begin. Everyone in front of June moved their shields, and he instructed them on how to do it correctly. After a few attempts, everyone understood what he wanted to achieve. Then June shouted again, "All spears to the front of the shields must be held firm and apart. Let the strongest swordsman keep the shield wall unbreakable." Li Piao looked at Shin and said, "He seems to know what he's doing. Yet, we should follow this strategy." All the captains of smaller groups followed Jun's orders, and soon the entire infantry took on a formation they had never done before. This even caught the attention of the cavalry, wondering what was happening with the infantry that was being sent to certain death. "Do not move, let the retreating soldiers in, and then form the wall again." June knew that the idea of reclaiming one of the mountains and killing their general with such a weak army was asking too much. It would be a blessing to leave this place alive, but June was not in a position to question a lunatic general's orders. Crack! 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 At that moment, the Wei army, which had just crushed the first wave of Qin infantry, was heading toward where June was giving instructions. "Do not panic, let them attack, and then let's show them we can take them down." June was getting further from the front line. "Aren't you going to lead the infantry?" Shin asked when he saw June so close to him. June turned around and said, "Of course, I'll be right behind you, I don't want to steal all the credit." "Are you afraid?" "Don't be ridiculous, I just think it's not my time," June said, looking at Shin's group members, nicknamed the Go strategy, his eyes fixed on Kyokai, who kept her entire face covered. She was just a 13-year-old girl. June guessed her age due to her small body, and he was right, though he didn't know it yet. June froze completely. He had thought the famous traitor would be older than him, which was why he was interested in meeting her. "Ready for this, good gentleman?" Li Piao looked at June more calmly and asked, "What are you talking about?" "Here they come." But at that moment, the Wei infantry crashed like monkeys in a cage against the shield wall that June had formed in no time, and the spears pierced the first line of soldiers. It was a massacre, but soon the shield wall that June had created was split in half when some were killed on the front line. "Damn it, this battle will be a fight between dogs and cats." June grabbed a shield from the ground, and in the middle of a battle he shouldn't have been in, he was dragged to the front line. "Don't run, you idiots! For Qin, my nation!" Patriotism wasn't helpful this time. June watched as all those who shouted to fight for their nation were killed as soon as they attacked. Chapter 37, A Foolish Way to Lose Good Men. "What do we do, sir?" June looked at a man who seemed terrified, asking what to do in this battle, as if he were his commander. "Just hold on, the cavalry will support us once they see things going wrong here." Crack! 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 "Damn it, hold the line!" "Ah! My leg! Aren't there any medics?" June was stunned. He had just made a tourniquet for a man who had lost half of his hand, only to discover that there were no doctors or healers here. He didn't know what they were called in this era, and even more tragically, he didn't know much about China. Kyokai watched June panic and moved behind him to take cover with her shield. She wasn't planning to attack like Shin at that moment. "What are you doing here?" June asked with a double meaning, first, asking Kyokai why she was in this war, and second, why she was behind him using him as a shield. "Taking cover." Kyokai was a girl of few words, she wouldn't start talking now in the middle of a war. June didn't have time either, he used his shield to protect others from being killed in such a tragic way, but he wasn't having much success. "They're all peasants, they'll die." "Thanks for stating the obvious. Anything else?" June asked, becoming increasingly hysterical as he didn't know how to control the unnecessary deaths that were happening. This was a foolish way to lose good soldiers. Qin was sending peasant soldiers to war, and Wei was doing the same. Neither nation had a proper standing army. For Wei, Qin bastards! Jun saw a soldier approaching him, and before he could attack, Kyukai threw a helmet she had found on the ground, hitting the forehead of the Wei soldier, who seemed eager to die. Damn idiot, does he know he's not supposed to attack alone? To battle! As soon as Jun's words left his mouth, Shin jumped like a monkey onto the battlefield, surrounded by enemies. Was that the protagonist? Jun would find out if that idiot named Shin survived. Meanwhile, Kyukai grabbed another helmet and said, "I'll cover you, keep the shield up." Do I have a choice? Jun was drenched in blood. This situation was more brutal than he had imagined. At first, he thought battles would be like in the movies, with great catapults and armies dressed in matching armor, but he had greatly overestimated nations that had been at war for over 500 years. Hold the line, do not break. Jun wasn't familiar with this type of battle, and things he couldn't control made him anxious. Shin, who had climbed onto some kind of carriage, shouted, "Something's coming." Jun, who was fighting for his life and Kyukai's while holding a shield, looked at Shin, who was pointing further into the Wei infantry, where a massive curtain of smoke was rising. Cavalry. Kyukai could barely see because of her height. No, this is something else. Jun widened his eyes and soon saw a chariot with long spikes on its wheels approaching at full speed. These were Wei's war chariots, the famous killing machines. Jun then recognized this chariot, being pulled by two horses, like a Roman carriage he was quite familiar with. The only difference with these war chariots was that they were designed precisely for war. The blades had long knives that constantly rotated in the direction of the wheels. Arg! Many infantry soldiers had been massacred, they could do nothing but run, including Jun, who dodged one of the war chariots by moving to the side. Where is Qin's cavalry? Jun knew that this was the only way to save the infantry and stop the Wei army, but even as the minutes passed, there was no sign of support from the army. Everything was very unfortunate, perhaps the general's madness was causing this. On the battlefield, the situation was very clear, the Qin army on the first mountain was being slaughtered. Trevor, who had returned, only saw Jun's donkey, Starfish, tied to a tent and wondered, where is Jun? He was supposed to inform the general about Jun's decisions on this battlefield, but the general didn't care much for his reports. He only mentioned that if the king had such high expectations of Jun, he should take the head of the general in charge of the first mountain, where the infantry was currently being slaughtered. Should I protect the donkeys or go find Jun to keep him from doing something stupid? Trevor wondered, slightly confused. Chapter 38, Taking the Initiative. Jun stood among seas of dead bodies, blood pooling in puddles, and the hellish screams of wounded soldiers were deafening. What should we do? Jun wondered as he analyzed the battlefield. If they ran now, the horse-drawn war chariots would finish them off, which would not be a good idea at all. On the other hand, if they kept attacking as they were, they would still die. It was then that Jun thought of something and shouted, "Everyone listen, we have less than 5 minutes before the war chariots turn around and attack us again. The only way to stop them is by piling up the corpses. Everything you find, you must create a mound and position yourselves behind it for protection." Shin, who had returned from a terrifying battlefield, looked at Jun and murmured, "Will that work?" "We have no choice, do you have any other ideas?" Jun, of course, wasn't waiting for everyone's opinion. He quickly grabbed one of the cold bodies from the ground and moved it in front of others stacked on top of each other. Anything he found would be useful to stop the war chariots. This was the only way not to depend on anyone else to stop the enemy currently massacring them. Kyukai once again saw that expression on Jun's face. His desire to save these people's lives was greater than the things he liked to do. "I thought the same," Kyukai said to a battle-shaken Shin. Everyone soon began to cooperate. It wasn't easy to pick up the bodies from the ground since some were still breathing. Jun looked at a Wei soldier who had grabbed his hand, and without thinking twice, he took out a knife, brought it close to the man's heart, and pressed it without much hesitation. Mercy was often the best way not to be cruel on the battlefield. Regardless of who they were, everyone deserved this, even if they were enemies. "Don't resist, you'll rest in a moment," Jun murmured to another body, giving the agonizing life its end. "Jun, how will we get out of this?" one of the members of Shin's group asked in panic. "Grab spears, long range is the best we have to eliminate the enemy," Jun shouted while grabbing a spear. Everyone followed Jun's instructions, not everyone was crazy enough to charge straight at the enemy without fear of being killed. Jun was also surprised by Shin, he was a beast on this battlefield. Maybe, if he wasn't the one who would change the fate of this battlefield due to his lack of aspirations, Shin could be an important figure who would mark a fundamental point in this world. It wasn't possible for him to be unharmed unless he had been trained since he was a child like Jun. Jun wasn't saying that his performance was something only he could do, just that it was far from common. They're coming. Everyone was behind the hills of corpses. Shin even dared to raise a Qin flag to attract the attention of the Wei war chariots and lead them toward the trap they had set. What do you think? Jun was mentally exhausted, so he calmly lay down in this place. He clearly had mental issues, but he assumed it was a muscle he had developed since he was a child. Does that guy have a problem in his head? Bai He wasn't the only one who thought Jun had serious mental problems. It wasn't surprising, but it was unusual. Jun had given them a torrent of different emotions in a short time. But now there were more important things to worry about. When Shin waved the Qin flag non-stop, the war chariots identified where they were and headed toward the hills of corpses. It was just a matter of waiting for them to crash and then kill them. Everyone, get ready. The screams and the snorting of the horses were all that could be heard, the smell of dust and blood had flooded Jun's nostrils, who calmly waited for his plan to bear fruit. When the war chariots got close enough to see that there were hills of corpses, it was too late. Watch out! Boom! 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 Various collisions echoed across the battlefield, all the leading war chariots overturned, and that was when the Qin infantry made their masterful move. Finish them all! War cries filled the battlefield, those who thought they were dead regained courage and attacked the Wei soldiers who were stunned by the crash. Clang! 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 Spears clashed against soldiers who had fallen from the war chariots, others slowed down, giving them the opportunity to kill them. This time, Jun participated more in the battle, cutting down numerous enemies who were seconds away from massacring his army. Take control of the chariots, form up in front, and wait for orders. Understood. Clang! 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 Jun threw several knives, swords, and spears he found on the ground at the Wei soldiers who made up the war chariots. They did not rely on cavalry, so they only had one chance to advance, and that was by taking the Wei war chariots to use them against them. No, it can't be. Bai He, Shin's best friend, believed he was better than Jun, who was only giving orders, so he followed him but found himself trapped in an attack by several enemies. Shin had seen this and wanted to help, but he knew that even if he moved, he wouldn't get there in time. But at that moment, Kyokai, who had kept more to herself than Jun, moved, and like a dancer in a field of roses, she beheaded 6 soldiers in just a few brief seconds. Jun's eyes flashed with madness when he saw the dance that the women of Haiyue performed and murmured, "I wasn't wrong, you are the little rebel from the Q village." Chapter 39, An ambitious man, but he doesn't know it yet. Without mentioning how Jun had gotten involved in a battle he hadn't intended to fight, everyone had been organized, and their performance in the battle was far more memorable than expected. All the infantry soldiers under the Qin flag took the horses that the Wei army had provided with their deaths. The war chariots that could be used were also moved as soon as they had the chance, and the newer shields were taken by those who did not have a horse. Jun, who had tied a black cloth around his forehead after his hair was stained with blood, led the remaining Qin soldiers, eager to take the head of the Wei general because he enjoyed challenges. Kyokai looked at Jun, her eyes revealed some surprise, and after thinking about it for a long time, she refused to believe that he could be from the Haiyue Clan, as he fought like a monkey without any technique. The Black Moon of the Haiyue Clan was supposed to be chosen before the princess of the Haiyue Clan, but Kyokai found it impossible that the current Black Moon of an assassin clan was leading a Qin infantry. She took a horse, there were many to choose from. Jun had been responsible for killing dozens of soldiers and retrieving the horses along with their chariots. Grab the shields, form a quick shield formation for those without a horse, and wait for instructions. Jun's voice resonated on the battlefield, his gaze was fierce. He hated many things in his life, but he never wanted to lose. That desire he had longed for was awakened in this battlefield. He didn't know what he wanted, but right now, the closest thing to what he desired was not losing here and now. The soldiers, who were now just over 300, took the shields scattered on the ground, ran with all their might to the front of the horses and war chariots, formed a shield, and waited for Jun's orders, who had become their general on this battlefield. Those who couldn't get shields ran to the spears and placed them above the shield wall. Everyone seemed connected, knowing exactly what to do at every moment they breathed on this battlefield. Shin, who had underestimated Jun, looked at him with more respect. In the end, it didn't matter if that man was crazy, he knew more than Shin did right now, so he asked, "Do you have any idea what to do now?" "We'll advance toward the hill, wait for the idiots to get overconfident, and then we'll kill them with the 10 war chariots we've taken from the Wei army." Jun had a plan in mind to avoid depending on the Qin cavalry that might never arrive. Let's say they advance further up the mountain, the Wei army stationed there will think they've massacred most of the Qin infantry with their war chariots, and then they will attack with all their infantry in a final push to slaughter the Qin soldiers. Jun left the cavalry command to Shin and entrusted the Bai brothers with the command of the war chariots, which would attack from the right to the left. Shin would be with 30 horsemen waiting for the Bai brothers to leave the battlefield, then, they would join the battle with the rest of the infantry, where Jun would be leading them. The captains of the Go groups had been relieved of their duties, but that was of no concern to Jun. Everyone received their orders, and soon enough, they knew the plan to be executed. Looking ahead, Jun ordered the shield wall to advance slowly. Step by step, they were not in a hurry, they were here to win with what little they had. "If things go wrong, can you cover my back and advance toward the enemy?" Jun was not a battle demon, especially when facing an army, but he knew that if Kyokai's skills were as he thought, they could both reach the general. A assassination mission, their specialties. "I'll follow you, but remember, I won't die here." Jun smiled slightly, looked at Kyokai, and said with confidence, "We'll win this before nightfall, we won't die." And this made both of them position themselves at the very back of the shield wall and the infantry behind them. "Here they come." In General Haiyue's tent, he was waiting for a signal to light up on the battlefield to know it was time to advance. Urgent message. A messenger entered the tent and shouted, "The 1st Infantry is being massacred." Urgent message. "The 2nd Infantry has been massacred." Urgent message. Everyone looked at the general, waiting for him to give the order for the cavalry to step forward in this battle. Urgent message. "The 4th Infantry led by a man named Jun is advancing toward the hill. It is reported that they are massacring the Wei infantry and will soon take the general's head." Impossible. It seems the time has come. General Haiyue looked at his subordinates and said, "Mobilize the cavalry, it's time to counterattack." Understood. All they knew was that they were about to attack, the rest would be understood gradually later. Chapter 40, A New Initiative 1. Everyone breathe, don't be afraid, stay as strong as trees rooted in the earth. Jun knew this was far from over. His gaze wandered across the battlefield, wanting to know more about what was about to happen. In the distance, the sounds of metal clashing against armor, swords being wielded by weak hands, and the sharp sound of arrows were heard. "Raise the shields." Jun's voice resonated strongly, giving the soldiers what they needed to keep fighting on this grim battlefield. Everyone had been abandoned, there was no reason to continue fighting, but they all did it without hesitation. That was admirable. Jun could never give his life for a place that treated him this way. If he was here, it was because of his peculiarities and also because he needed fresh air since it was difficult to entertain himself in lonely places like his palace. The Wei infantry advanced furiously onto the battlefield, having left their garrison troops, leaving the commander with few soldiers. "Once the battle starts, we need to attack the commander. Follow me if you want to be part of the victory." Jun wanted to avoid taking credit for these battles. Anonymity was the best way to spend the rest of his days unnoticed. "Die, bastard Qin dogs!" Clang! 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 The swords clashed against the shield wall that remained strong, but it was a very small wall that could be surrounded. That's why the time it would hold this time would be limited. "Jun, enemies are coming from behind." Kyokai informed Jun while he looked for the best route to climb the hill directly to where the Wei general commanded the 3rd mountain. But before that, he needed to improve the situation for the infantry. "Double shield wall!" he shouted, waking up the soldiers who were frightened. Half of the soldiers turned around and placed the shield wall to protect their flanks. At first glance, it seemed they were in a bad situation, but Jun remained calm because what was coming next was better. Everyone had to hold out. If they could, they would win this battle before they were killed by the Wei soldiers. Clang! 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 Jun, who initially had no interest in participating in this battle, was now immersed in a fierce fight against the Wei soldiers. His sword began to move like a snake seeking the life of its prey, everyone who stood before him was decapitated. The Black Moon dance was increasingly taking shape in his fierce movements, it was like a great general in battle. We have a gap. June stepped back, grabbed a shield, and placed it in the gap where there was an opening. At this moment, they only had to wait. At a considerable distance, Bai Hai watched as the Wei army infantry attacked with all their numbers against the remaining Qin army, which barely had any men left in their ranks. The battle was fierce, with the dead increasing in number. But the Qin army was much fiercer than before. The shield wall strategy was very advantageous, allowing them to hold firm against so many enemies. It's time to move, they've placed shield walls on both flanks. Bai Hai realized it was time to attack with the war chariots. At that moment, taking the reins of the horses, the war chariots advanced rapidly toward the Wei army that had gathered in front of the shield walls. Let's go! Argh! The fierce war chariots would crush the Wei infantry, the battle would improve for Qin, but it wouldn't be for long. We must exit the field on the second pass. Bai Hai followed Jun's instructions to the letter. They knew that by following these orders, they could win this battle.
Thanks for listening.